I like to think of this as like a mice in a field versus a hawk. If you really play up that angle, you know, give her lots of line of sight, give her lots of ways to catch up to players. And like I said, you got to give your players a little shred of hope.
From the Red Baron to Top Gun, there is something thrilling about the ace who deals out death in the skies. And what could be better than that but on Draconic wings, at the head of the airborne forces of the Red Dragon Army, the mysterious, the deadly Red Ruin is coming our way. And to talk about her and what she can do and how scared we should be on a scale of 1 to 10, we have Jasmine Bhullar back with us. Hi, how you doing?
Hello, I'm doing wonderful. So excited to be here.
We are thrilled to have you, and I am very excited to get some of your tips because I'm very excited about this new villain that we're getting in Dragonlance, Shadow of the Dragon Queen. Her name is Red Ruin, or actually, it isn't, because no one knows her name. She rarely takes off her incredibly cool helmet. She rarely speaks, just giving commands with hand gestures to her troops. She leads the airborne forces of the Red Dragon Army, and she is known as Red Ruin. Jasmine, what are your first thoughts on this new villain, and what jumps out at you about this stat block?
Well, my first thoughts are that she is one of the few things you can throw at your characters when they get annoying, at your players, I should say, when they get annoying. You know, a lot of DMs, I see this on online threads a lot, hate when their players have abilities that allow them to fly early in the game. I don't know if you've noticed that, Amy. A lot of DMs hate Aarakocra, anything that can fly. And my response is, if you throw Red Ruin at them, she'll clip those wings really quick, you know? That this is what she's good at. So if you have a party that, you know, a druid that shapeshifts into aerial form and gets annoying, and you're tired of using archers, give them a little taste of Red Ruin and it'll ground them a little bit, literally. It's a good way to ground your players. But
bring them back down to earth, crashing or making backup plans, whatever might be appropriate. I love that. A feature that I think is really interesting for Red Ruin is Draconic Devotion. And this one says, while Red Ruin can see a dragon that isn't hostile to her, she has advantage on attack rolls.
And she can attack 3 times. So advantage times 3 means pretty good likelihood that even if your AC is high, you're going to get hit and possibly crit.
And that attack could send you crashing to Earth, but along with that, she's riding a Dragonnel. She's riding one of these Dragon Army Dragonnels. So that bond is going to be a little dangerous to tangle with.
Definitely. Dragonnels don't have the breath weapon that your traditional dragons do, but they are still really formidable. They're very mobile. They have a flying speed of 60 and they don't provoke op attacks. So they have a lot in their arsenal in terms of hit and run capabilities. And when it comes to Red Ruin, if you have her in a group setting or as a commander with a bunch of mounted units, which is how I would play her, she becomes a threat immediately because you are either forced with dealing with her while she has advantage on all her attacks or dealing with a host of Dragonels, which neither one of those is honestly very ideal.
How scared should I be as a player, and how as a DM do you help sell the ominous dread of this fighter ace coming down at you?
Yeah, some of that, in my opinion, is, as always, flavor, the rule of cool. And I think given Red Ruin's reputation, it's about flavoring even the foot soldiers around her, right? So you can say something like, oh, you know, you deal a mighty blow to this, you know, man, but he sees the Red Ruin in the distance and he gets up one more time to fight you. And that's how you can flavor those last 10 hit points. You can have people fighting to the death. And you can even use mechanics that they have in some other 4X style games where maybe people rout and start to run away. And then she kind of inspires them to come back and charge again. Stuff like that's really good at kind of scaring your players or selling the idea that this boss is a force to be reckoned with, you know? I always love those kinds of concepts when you bring them in, and you tie the flavor and the mechanics together. You can even, like I said, tie something in where, like if you knock another unit off their Dragonnel, maybe she can help pick them up or put them back up, or knock one of your characters off, or grab them and dangle them over the abyss or whatever you're flying over. Like, these are all really great ways to like really strike fear into your players. Because she is the mounted unit, and because she has such a unique skill set that really makes her a threat when she is mounted, makes her very difficult to be grounded, you can use that to your advantage by like scooping up your players and flying off with them and dropping them. Fall damage is formidable.
It really is. And her attacks, she's got one that's up close called the Ember Lance, and then she's got one that's going to be great at a distance, which is that explosive hand crossbow. But that lance attack in the medieval joust, and yes, of course I am picturing Heath Ledger in A Knight's Tale because I'm pretty much always picturing A Knight's Tale, but it's dangerous getting unhorsed except in the sky. I think we all know fall damage is bad.
Yes. Fall damage is bad, and she knocks you prone if you do not make your save. And like I said, rolling with advantage, 3 hits, it's going to be hard to save on all of those and to not get hit with all of those. Even with her ranged attacks, it actually specifies that the crossbow bolt blows up regardless of whether or not it reaches its destination. So if you have a fighter that tries to intercept it with a shield, since we know that there are some like martial archetypes that can do that, it will still explode and do AoE damage. It can't really be obstructed. And so she has kind of an answer for everything. And I think that's what's really scary about her.
2 more features that will enhance that sense that she is just death on wings here. Let's talk about Mounted Combat Master and Mounted Evasion. So first up, Mounted Combat Master. When Red Ruin is mounted and a creature targets her mount with an attack, Red Ruin can cause the attack to target her instead. And Mounted Evasion, when Red Ruin or her mount makes a dexterity saving throw to take half damage from an effect, they take no damage on a success and half damage on a failure. So they are dodging, and you cannot go after her Dragonnel. Jasmine, this is so scary.
Yes, like I was saying, she's a very difficult unit to ground. And so she's very maneuverable, and it's one of those things where your party's gonna have to get very creative in how they deal with her, because like with most fights of this nature, the obvious answer is, okay, kill her mount and then she'll fall to the ground, but she makes that very, very difficult to do. So you have no choice but to fly her, most likely, while she's mounted.
So, all right, how can DMs make sure that Red Ruin is a deadly threat?
In order to make sure Red Ruin is like a real threat to your party, you need to put her in a really cool setting. You need to give her stuff around her to use, and you need to give your players a false sense of security. Like I said, those crossbow bolts do an AoE regardless of whether or not people are, let's say, behind a barrel or in cover. So I like to think of this as like a mice in a field versus a hawk. If you really play up that angle, give her lots of line of sight, give her lots of ways to catch up to players. And like I said, you got to give your players a little shred of hope. Put them in a ruined, burned down village, that just has like a couple of matchsticks of houses left to protect them. And then sick her on them and make sure she's got a good battalion behind her of those Dragonnels, and then just watch her do work. And like I said, use the terrain to your advantage, like there's cliffs, there's valleys, there's rivers. Throw a player in the river. That would be very interesting. I would like to see it. Now one player is swimming away, maybe drowning, and the other ones are left. Split the party. That's another really great way, because this is another thing where I think like the players could potentially get an advantage on her. But if you split them up, a lot harder to do that. But when you have a flying Dragonnel army, a lot easier to split the party up against their will. That's what I would do to strike fear into people's hearts, but I also might be chaotic evil, so. But, I mean, she's lawful evil, so maybe me and Red Ruin are more alike than we thought.
Look, we don't know who Red Ruin actually is. It could be you. So, you can split the party up, you can drop them in the river, you can use the environment to your advantage. We know that her attacks have the ability to knock you right off whatever you might happen to be riding and send you plummeting to earth. When you're playing Red Ruin, who do you go after first?
You know, I would actually say the melee characters, because the ranged characters could be knocked down and still potentially be useful. They're also more likely to have something in their kit to prevent fall damage. Whereas if you knock down the meatiest member, number one, they won't expect it. Number two, you then get this like added advantage of having the magic users in the party scrambling to save them. So you actually burn their turn on that round as well. And that's what you want to do. You want to burn actions. Red Ruin doesn't have any legendary actions. She doesn't have any reactions. So you really want to, this is where the action economy comes into play. You want to see what you can do to waste the party's actions so you can make sure that she gets that damage in on every round.
I have just a picture of the fighter falling midway through the sky, like still in the process of being surprised that this is happening, and it's a glorious mental image.
Yeah, this is a bit like jousting though. Like, you know, it's one of those things where being dismounted could come at a huge advantage. And that's actually one of the things I would say you want to be careful with Red Ruin is potentially not keeping her super close to the ground. Because that's where you can potentially create ways to like maybe entangle her even if you don't knock her off her mount. So that could be another strategy your players use. Because that's what I would probably try to do, is probably try to lure her somewhere where I could tie her down. But just you know, as a DM, think about it from the reverse side.
So what kind of inspiration would you draw on for this? You mentioned jousting, we've talked about fighter pilots for bringing this kind of death from above feeling to life.
You know, this is gonna sound kind of cheesy, but it kind of reminds me of Dragon Ball Z. I know that sounds like a bit funny, but like, you know, this idea of like, and I know earlier I was saying, oh, put your players like mice on a field, you know, with the hawk above, which is one strategy. But it would be equally cool to give them winged mounts or give them Dragonnels of their own for this adventure, and have that kind of play out, this like sort of face off, because I just remember watching that cartoon after school when I was a kid and seeing them like floating in the air and then like kind of pinning each other to the ground and stuff like that. Like, it makes the hit seem so much bigger. And I love the idea of like someone dive bombing and taking somebody else with them in like this kind of do or die fashion. I think there's a lot of options for like cinematic battle with Red Ruin, and I highly recommend leaning into it. You know, jokes aside, bullying players aside, I definitely think like if you give them winged mounts, it's also like this like sorrowful thing if this Dragonnel comes and like, you know, rips your giant hawk's throat out, and then you not only are you plummeting to your death, maybe you've lost a dear friend, you know. Like I said, they're not dragons, they don't have breath weapons, but they are still pretty chunky, and they do have their claws. They have some rending attacks that could be potentially fatal. And yeah, I would say strength in numbers, honestly, that's where Red Ruin shines.
I'm absolutely going to be picturing one of the sort of like plunging into the ground, dust in a giant explosion all around it, just like the impact. That's what happens when the fighter hits the ground. I know, I understand now.
Yeah, and then like a boulder like cracks in half every time, and that's how you know that it was like a real like, you know, pile driver, is when it happens like from the zenith of the sky all the way to the ground. That's my favorite.
And the boulder cracking and falling apart is them like making the 20 on the death saves to stand back up with 1 hit point. Like that's definitely what's going on there.
Yes, 100%, 100%.
When you encounter Red Ruin in Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen, it is possible that you may be set up for some of these qualities to really matter, may have a ride of your own for an encounter in the skies, but you'll have to check that out when the adventure comes our way very shortly, because early access is coming up on the 22nd if you pre-order the bundle with the physical and digital versions, and the full release is on December 6th. Jasmine, do you have any final thoughts on Red Ruin and how you would play her?
Lean into the silence. I always feel like quiet bad guys are the scariest, and let her minions do her talking for her.
I love that. bring the silent and menacing and mysterious figure of Red Ruin to your table, and thank you for the tips on how we can try to survive it. Jasmine, where can people find you for more great advice or player peril?
Yeah, of course. I'm a full-time content creator on Twitch, and I also write and develop for tabletop RPGs. I'm a world builder on Critical Role and Into the Motherlands. You can find me at ThatBronzeGirl everywhere and at lastcalladforadventure.com.
And we will see you next time on D&D Beyond.